And now for you, on this, the 60-second weekly Friday show from Radio Free UK, we bring you the second part of that One Dimitri radio show. This is an interview with Mark Krikorian about Donald Trump's extreme vetting.
I was amazed when I saw Donald Trump talking about how he was going to protect America from jihadists coming into the United States. He started talking about something called extreme vetting, and it sounded remarkably similar to what Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies had said here on One Dimitri Radio back in June about, well, we need ideological screening, and we've been talking about this for years, and we have it on our website and all that. And so I went back to that interview, and it was like, oh, my God, Mark Krikorian just nailed this because now Donald Trump's talking about it. So I re-aired that interview a few nights ago, but I still wanted to get an update from Mark Krikorian because now, I mean, it looks like he's on the cutting edge of this whole thing and could give us a lot more information, including correcting how the media is spinning this thing as if it's some sort of a political thing, when in fact it is not. So I thought, well, I guess I'm pretty sure that the establishment media is going to downplay this or distort this, so why don't I give you the truth through the eyes of Mark Krikorian with the Center for Immigration Studies. So, Mark, welcome back to One Dimitri Radio. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about this extreme vetting that Donald Trump spoke about a few days ago. Did you see that speech? And if you did, what did you think about it?
Well, the speech overall was a pretty good speech. It wasn't all immigration. It was about dealing with jihadists and radical Islam. And the written, the speech prepared as written was on their website. So what I did is listened to the immigration section and read along with it, and he actually stuck pretty well to the speech. And just FYI, the written version of the speech on their website has like 150 footnotes. I mean, this was actually basically kind of like a term paper almost delivered as a speech. And I mean, I'm sure his speechwriters are the ones who came up with the footnotes, but the only thing that bothered me was the thing that ends up in the headline of every story, which is the ad-libbed part, extreme vetting. That was not in the written speech. That was something that Mr. Trump just sort of can't help himself and kind of Archie Bunkerized the speech. But the principle, I mean, first of all, it sounds like it's, body cavity search or something like that. But what it really is values screening. In other words, making sure this is not really about the violent jihad. In other words, about actual terrorists who want to kill people, because that's already, you're already barred. You're already not supposed to be allowed in if you're a actual member of a terrorist group or that kind of thing. And, we may do that. We may keep those people out in more or less effectively, but it's already a principle everybody accepts. What the concept that he brought up in the speech and that he ended up calling extreme vetting was to keep out people who reject our values, even if they're not actually a member of ISIS or planning to kill anybody. So, for instance, if you lead the Tuesday morning Death to America rally in Karachi, Pakistan every week, but you're not a member of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Taliban, you haven't sent them money, anything like this, you're a peaceful guy, you go around you go through your day doing your usual thing, you just hate America and hate free speech and hate freedom of religion and think it's great to beat your wife and kill gays, we don't want you moving here. You should not be allowed to join our society. Now, if you're coming to go to a conference for 3 days, a business conference, you're going to Disneyland for a couple of days, well, I don't really care what you think about killing gays. I mean, that's bad, but you're not coming to join our society. You're passing through. You drop some money, do some business, whatever it is, and then leave. Okay, fine. But if you're coming here to live, and I would include in that as a foreign student because they live here for years, and in fact, many of them end up becoming immigrants later, we should have some basic lowest common denominator kinds of things that you have to agree to before you get to move here. In other words, And in fact, one of my people suggested, well, instead of just having like a interrogation, why not just have a contract they have to sign? Everybody, not just Muslims, anybody. That I believe that people can say what they want, even if they're insulting religious figures in a way that I think is unfair. They should not be stopped by the law from doing that. I think that people should be allowed to leave any religion or join any religion or not have any religion at all, even if I think that's a mistake. I don't think the law should stop them. In other words, basic things like this. I believe that it's wrong to beat your wife if you have one, and have people sign it. Now, terrorists, actual people who have been plotting with ISIS to blow up a high school football game or something, and this is the way they're getting into the United States, those people aren't going to care. They're going to sign anything they want, because this isn't about terrorism in the immediate short term. This is about keeping enemies of our values out of the country, and that will have partly a terrorism benefit, because those are the kinds of people who could develop terrorists or become terrorists themselves or encourage it, but also to reinforce or prevent the erosion of these basic values like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Because basically when you think about it, you got to think about it this way. What proportion of our population is it necessary to have to reject freedom of speech and freedom of religion before we lose those values? How many foreigners can we let in who hate our constitutional order and our open society before we start losing those things? I don't want to find out what that percentage is. Maybe it's not a problem now. I don't want to find out. I want to make sure, to whatever degree we can, we keep out gay killing, or people who support the killing of gays and the killing of apostates and the jailing of blasphemers and the beating of your wife and female genital mutilation. I want to keep people out who believe in that stuff to the degree that we can, and it is outrageous to say that even trying to do so is wrong and unconstitutional. You can say, well, there's no real practical way to do that. Okay, I disagree, but that's at least a legitimate objection. But too many of the folks in the New York Times and, in the Washington Post and Politico and other outlets, too many people, supposedly experts, are saying it's outrageous to even suggest that you should be barred from joining our society if you favor killing gays. Well, that's ridiculous. And it takes a Ivy League degree to think something so absurd.
Is this something new in American history, or has this been a common practice since the creation of our republic?
We've had stuff like this for centuries. Now, some of the bans, prohibitions on moving here have been like the terrorism ban. In other words, if you're an anarchist, you're still not allowed to move here. If you were a member of the Communist Party or you're a member of the Nazi Party, that kind of stuff. But those, like I said, are particular membership actions you took instead of things you believe in. But there have been, and still are, prohibitions, for instance, against people who support polygamy. It's not, and that's still in the law, it's not people who have multiple wives. That you're not allowed to bring two wives into the United States if you're a foreigner. Although, frankly, give the PC left enough time, and Muslims who have 4 wives will be allowed to move with all their wives, probably. But that's not the way it is now. But the law says even if you believe in polygamy, if you support polygamy, even if you don't have 2 wives yourself, you are prohibited from moving here. So this is not something that's completely new. And in fact, during the Cold War, you could be denied entry to the United States based on your beliefs, statements, and associations. In other words, if you said, I think communism is great, and I want to replace the U.S. Constitution with communism. You could be barred even if you weren't an actual card-carrying member of the PCUSA, of the CP, of the Communist Party of the United States. We got rid of that in 1990. Barney Frank introduced legislation to eliminate the ability of the State Department to turn people down based on their beliefs, statements, and associations. And we need to put that back in.
Back in the day, back in the end of the 1700s, 1800s, what kind of values vetting did they have then? Or did they have any values vetting back then?
There wasn't really much vetting back then. The vetting that involved, in fact, going back to the colonial era, the vetting was mainly stuff like if you're going to become a welfare case, to the limited welfare they had, but I mean, if you were the kind of person who was going to be indigent and end up living off the community, you were not allowed in. If you were, polygamous, like I said, that was one of the things, you weren't allowed in. If you were a prostitute or a pimp, you weren't allowed in. That was the kind of screening we had back then. We did not have way back, in the early period, except maybe in New England, we did have some. They did have in colonial Massachusetts. They had some screening because they wanted to keep out people who weren't Congregationalists. So in a sense, that's a similar thing. But we have expanded, or let me put it this way, sort of become more universalist in the values that we're applying. So what I'm suggesting is things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion, equality of all people, equality of the sexes, this kind of thing. And that kind of vetting we really haven't had in the distant past because it really wasn't the kind of issue, it wasn't the kind of threat we now face with jihadism.
Yeah, in New England, not only did they not want people who weren't Congregationalists, I think they were also screening for witches. That if you were a witch, you would have a tough time getting into the United States. But
I'm pretty sure.
That'd be my guess. Okay, now let me play the devil's advocate. What if people just lie?
They can lie, but there's two reasons we should do it anyway. Like I said, the committed terrorist is going to lie anyway, but that's not what this is directed at. And the two reasons we should do it anyway is, number one, if you have, for instance, this statement of basic lowest common denominator values that you need to subscribe to and sign before you get your green card, people considering immigration, people who are not here now, the brother of some Pakistani guy who has a restaurant in New York and wants to bring his brother over to work in the restaurant. Well, that brother is, among other things, going to look, okay, what's it involve? How much do I have to pay? What are the fees? And also, I have to sign this thing. Let me look at it. And there's a non-trivial number of people who are going to look at something like that and say, really? America's not for me. I don't believe in this kind of stuff. So it's going to deter some number of people, just as a practical matter. And the other thing is, it sets down a marker. It sends the message, we do not want you in our society if you don't believe in these basic values. And that is worth doing regardless of, even if it doesn't keep out a single person, it's worth doing because it sets down a marker. It says, this is what we believe. We may believe in a lot of other things too, but this is kind of a core basic things that we believe, that all of us pretty much in the United States believe. There's always fringe exceptions, but generally speaking, everybody, right, left, and center, believes in the basics of freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And that's valuable for ourselves even. In other words, it's a way of making us say everything isn't relative, that what you have, Saudi Arabia is not just as good as America. We, in fact, these are things that are better. And if you don't believe in these things, your society is inferior to ours. And so as one writer put it, a little bit of cultural imperialism is good when your society is, in fact, better than other societies, which ours is.
Well, the only problem is that most of the politicians inside the Beltway, the elitists, the post-Americans, actually don't believe that. Is that right?
Probably not, but this kind of puts them on the spot. That's why I think it's so valuable, even just as a political message. I mean, this isn't just, for me, this isn't just about, political messaging. It's actually, I believe this as a policy, but just politically, it's good because the question, that Trump, if he were, had his act together, would be able to ask, say, Mrs. Clinton during a debate would be, do you think it's okay to let people who support the killing of gays move to the United States and join our society? Yes or no? And she said, well, there aren't any, nobody believes it. Well, obviously some people do believe that. A lot of people believe that. And do you think it's okay for them to move? Do you want to welcome into your community, or should Americans anywhere be required to welcome into their communities people who think it's okay to beat their wives and behead people who insult Mohammed? Yes or no? And so it seems to me that while what you're saying is right, that the cultural relativism of much of our elite, that everything's just as good as everything else, is real. This is a way to expose that as a bogus thing that no regular people actually believe in. And in fact, even the our political and business and cultural elite, the Davos people who kind of are post-Americans, even they don't believe that it's just as good to kill gays as it is to not kill gays. So it exposes, even for themselves, the absurdity of cultural relativism.
Davos being that thing in Switzerland where all the rich people fly in on private jets and then bemoan global warming and all that?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've seen some of those on TV. It's unbelievable. Boy, God, are they rich, though. Jesus, are they rich. Jeez. Yeah. Anyway, now this contract, the citizenship contract, intriguing idea. Have we ever done that in America?
We have done it and still do it for citizenship, but not for permanent residence. You see what I mean? In other words, for citizenship now, to become a naturalized citizen, you not only have to take a test, that George Washington was the father of our country, and there's 27 amendments to the Constitution, this kind of stuff, and show some very minimal grasp of English, although even there's exceptions. But also, the law says that becoming a citizen, you should have to demonstrate, the way that puts it is demonstrate your attachment to the principles of the Constitution. So that's what I'm talking about. That's a values test, a values screening. Now, we may not do that very well, but the law already says that for citizenship. What I think we need to do is push it upstream for getting your green card in the first place, because you have to get a green card, permanent residence, to live here legally before you can eventually become a citizen. Not everybody who gets a green card becomes a citizen, but everybody who becomes a citizen has to have had a green card first. And so what I'm suggesting is we push it upstream. Instead of ensuring that instead of making people demonstrate their attachment to the principles of the Constitution to become a citizen, I want to make that something they have to show, or at least pretend, in order to get a green card and live in our communities as part of our society. Before, in other words, screen more people so that it's not as though you've already lived here for 10 or 15 years. You're already part of our society. You've had kids. The kids have grown up. And then you say, I really should become a citizen. I want to do it before that. I want to do it before you even get here.
And that might have stopped that Taliban-loving guy from Afghanistan whose son ended up killing all those people in Orlando. Might have stopped him from coming here.
Yes, exactly.
Are there other countries that have citizenship contracts?
That's a good question. I'm not even sure how Canada and Australia do it. They probably do something similar for citizenship, but not, as far as I know, not for letting immigrants move permanently to their country to begin with. In other words, not the first step, the equivalent of the green card, but yes, for citizenship. Although I think Denmark and maybe some other European countries have started to do something like that for immigrants. And it's not so much a contract, but I remember there was a whole story on this. I think it was Denmark, had like a brochure and a video and stuff about what it's like to live in Denmark. And they showed, like, you know, two guys holding hands. I mean, it wasn't the whole thing, but it was, you know, they had pictures of people walking around, including women, you know, without covering on their faces and all that stuff, as well as other things. But the point was to try to show, you know, somebody from Morocco or Pakistan or Afghanistan that this is the kind of society you're coming into. To me, that's okay, but not enough. In other words, it needs to be more proactive. Instead of hinting that you're going to have to go along with this, actually have them sign something that says, I believe in freedom of speech, even if it insults religious figures in a way that I believe to be unfair. People still have the right to do that. Make people sign on the dotted line for stuff, and you're going to dissuade. Even Doris Meissner, who's a kind of lefty, former head of the INS Democrat, even she has said, well, you know, this probably would significantly reduce the number of people willing to come here. Well, okay, good. You know what I mean? Those are people we don't want here if they would be dissuaded by something like that.
Yeah, I wonder how they say in Denmark it's illegal to rape. I think that might be another thing to include in the brochure. It's like
they do. Germany does something. They actually have like a comic book, I think, you know, that has a picture of a girl in, you know, skimpy clothing walking by and a guy's hand reaching out to grab her butt and then like a red X through it or something like that. So I just saw that recently. So that, you know, in Europe they're trying to do things like this, but it seems to me you need to be a lot more proactive, upfront, and demanding. It's not, you know, it'd be really nice if you didn't rape women. You know what I mean? That's not good enough. You got to have them sign something saying, I believe in the equality before the law of men and women in all circumstances. And if you don't believe it, shove off.
Unbelievable. Have there been any polls done to gauge the popularity of this values screening here in America?
No, there have not. But I got to believe this is a 70-80% issue. I mean, how many Democrats, I don't mean lefty kooks, but I mean regular people who, you know, sort of lean Democrat. How many people like that are going to say, oh, yeah, I want more wife-beating gay killers to move into my neighborhood? Nobody. I mean, so yeah, this is in the hands of a politician, of a more deft politician, and I'm still, you know, knock on wood, hoping Trump could maybe use this effectively. This is a devastating issue for the left because even their own voters don't think it's a good idea to import people who think it's okay to behead apostates.
Yeah, in fact, what I've never understood, and again, you understand, I'm talking to Mark Krikorian, head of Center for Immigration Studies, always terrific radio with this guy, always. Mark, I've never understood why it is that in America, when a family decides to do genital mutilation, female genital mutilation of their daughters, why they aren't arrested, convicted, and thrown in prison.
Because it's cultural relativism. It's like, well, that's just sort of their way. I mean, why aren't rapists being arrested in Germany? Well, if they're so-called refugees, basically if they're Muslims, they have this a separate standard. They get to do things that other people don't because they're different. It's their way, you know. So it's the same thing with female genital mutilation. And I got to say, it's similar, and this is not the same situation exactly, but it comes from the same thing, is that illegal immigrants, you know, just regular, mostly Latin American, but they don't have to be, illegal immigrants in the United States, if they, you know, engage in identity theft and tax fraud and perjury and all kinds of things, they're given a pass too, because, you know, it's like, well, they sort of have to do that, and they have to, you know, it's like, let's not hold them to the same standard. It's the same thing. And so that's why, for instance, even though you've got feminist groups trying to work against this clitoridectomy, as they call them, female genital mutilation, which I really don't want to describe on the family radio show.
Well, there's nothing family about it. Feel free.
Yeah, okay.
Just
no. But I mean, the point is, it's, you know, Often, the way it's done in the Middle East and parts of Africa, you're using sharpened glass to basically cut off the clitoris of a baby girl. I mean, it's just appalling thing, and it's illegal in the United States. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in federal law. I know it's illegal in almost all states as well, and yet there's just not a lot of prosecution of it because people say, well, it's the cultural norm, this kind of thing. This fits into a piece I wrote a long time ago in National Review, which I wanted to call, they changed the title, but I wanted to call it Open Borders über alles. That for the left especially, open borders trumps, no pun intended, trumps everything. In other words, if you're a labor union and open immigration is bad for American workers, it doesn't matter. You can't be against immigration because it is the primary value. Everything else has to be sacrificed. If you're the ACLU, for instance, this was an outrageous example. In New York, there was a guy I know who put up a billboard calling for, saying immigration should be reduced. And it was a very anodyne thing. It says, the Census Bureau says that if immigration policy isn't changed, our United States will reach 1 billion people or something by some year. That's not, is that really what you want for your kids? And there's nothing, incendiary or anything about it. The New York City government told the owner of the billboard, the guy who, leased it to the person who put the message up, the guy who owns the physical billboard, the government of New York City went to that guy and they said, we are coming after you unless you take this down. It was political censorship. And the guy who put the billboard up went to the ACLU and they said, we have too many immigrant rights people. We're going to have to pass on this. So this is a group that defended Nazi filth, waving their obscenities in the face of Holocaust survivors because it was free speech, that wouldn't defend a completely anodyne, calm, simple billboard because it critiqued immigration. The reason I went into all of this is that it's the same with feminists. Mass immigration is bad for feminism, especially mass immigration of people from the Middle East. They were bringing in people who reject the very concept of the moral equality of men and women, and yet keeping immigration going is more important than anything for the left, even more important than protecting women.
Why?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's a kind of self-hatred that America in general, the West in general, but in this context, America is bad. And anything that is that is bad, that sort of undoes America, is good. And so defending American sovereignty must never be allowed to happen, even if that means that black workers are hurt, or that women are hurt, or that free speech or freedom of religion is sacrificed. It doesn't matter, because defending those things would require defending American sovereignty and American values, and that is something that the left especially is literally cannot and will never do.
It's difficult for me to wrap my ears around everything that you just said, even though I am sure it is all true. Is there any hope for our republic?
Yeah, there's always hope. I don't know. It's my theory on this. I'm kind of a cockeyed optimist, I guess, in the sense that we're always teetering on the edge of the toilet ready to fall in, and yet everybody else falls in before us. The Nazis, the communists, whatever it is, and the jihadists they're gonna lose. It's a complete dead end. There's no way that traditional Islamic society, with everything that goes along with that, is sustainable in the modern world. They're just literally incompatible, and modernity isn't going away. Islam is going to change. Radical Islam is going to fail. So in that sense, yeah, I'm optimistic. My question is, though, how much damage do we sustain until we win? And I kind of want to minimize the harm that we do to our own society, even though I'm actually pretty confident in eventual victory.
Wow. Well, Mark, you're always a great guest. Always enjoy listening to you. I could listen to you all day long, but I know you're extremely...
I could listen to me all day long, too.
No, what you're supposed to say is, no, Dimitri, I could listen to you all day. That would have been the nice thing. But, of course, you're Mark Krikorian. You're kind of snarky because I follow you on Twitter and all that. Anyway, I always give my guest the last word, even you. So this is your chance to speak directly to our listeners here at One Dimitri Radio. You're free to repeat key points that you've made, bring up new points, and also shamelessly plug your books, your speaking engagements, your website, social media, anything and everything. So Mark Krikorian, Center for Immigration Studies, my microphone is yours.
Thank you, Dimitri. Love the show. Great show. To see more of my snark, if you're on Twitter, follow me at Mark S., as in Stephen, Mark S. Krikorian. That's my Twitter handle. And our website is CIS.org, and there's a lot more to CIS than just me. I mean, my research director jokes that he puts the think in think tank, and that's probably true. We've got top people writing on law enforcement, on demographics and economics, all kinds of stuff. And it's on our website. We have a blog that has new postings pretty much every day, and sign up for our weekly kind of reminders of what the new stuff is that we've done and new publications, that kind of thing. So CIS.org is our website, and Mark S., as in Stephen, Mark S. Krikorian is my Twitter handle. Thanks.
Fantastic. Mark Krikorian, we'll get you back on again real soon. Keep up the great work, and I hope you have a great day.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Britain, when you run out of data, it hurts. So get on EE Pay As You Go. We're giving away free boosts of data for everyone. Every 3 months, you unlock a new level of data. First, we boost your data by 500 megabytes a month, then by 1 gig a month, then by 1.5 gigs, and it keeps going. So the longer you stay, the more data you'll have for Snapchatting. Search EE Free Boosts.
Choose a free boost after you buy pay-as-you-go packs for 3 months. Terms apply. See ee.co.uk/PAYG.